Hey everyone, Kate and Fiona joining you for this week's Facebook Live, where we're continuing to talk about authenticity. And I think there's been lots of layers to this one. This week we want to talk to how organisations really facilitate individuals to show up and lead in an authentic way. And I think, Fee, when we step back here, how do you do this in a meaningful way? This is far beyond policies, procedures, statements that it's safe to do. So it's looking at, the unwritten ground rules and seeing if they give people permission, certainty, and safety to truly show up in their authentic selves.
Yes, yeah, I think this is a big conversation when we're in organisations, we're talking to leaders. We know there's lots of layers here. There's lots of different initiatives. There's lots of ways we could come at this. And we wanted to share today 3 things that we've found have been really powerful in organisations and have seen a material and substantial shift in the way they're doing things. And the first thing that we've seen that often gets overlooked is listening. And when we're saying listening, we mean really listening, really hearing to what's being said, but equally being curious about what's not being said. Which voices are loud in this system and heard a lot from, maybe quite dominant, and which voices are absent or missing. And the more we start to be conscious of that, we will intuitively start to see that there are potentially minority groups or groups that don't feel as comfortable to speak up, that don't feel as comfortable to share their authentic self or share their experiences for a whole lot of reasons. And starting to think about ways to include them, starting to ask good questions, not to put them on the spot or to, amplify the difference, but more about being curious about how could they participate more, be involved, be able to share their perspective, which might be quite different to some of those louder voices.
Yeah, I think listening is easy to dismiss, both as a skill and an assessment of our effectiveness of that. But equally, as leaders, we do a lot of talking and are really busy, right, in terms of multitasking and prioritising. And so I think as you're listening to this, really getting curious around how you do show up and listening to everything that's being said, the body language, the energy, there's so many different data points that we get when we truly show up and are present and listen holistically to the conversations and the experiences that we're part of. I think the second piece is exploring the alignment between the values and the lived experience of people in the system or the demonstrated behaviours. I think this is always a little bit of a bugbear of mine. All organisations have values. We hear feedback constantly from individuals who talk about, my organisation says a specific thing is important, maybe says respect is important, says trust is important, yet I witness behaviours in my organisation every day by multiple people across the system that tell me it's not important. And I think getting curious, stepping us outside of judgment and assumption and getting curious about what is it that we say is important, and then how is that demonstrated in the behaviours.
Yeah, I love this. And I think there are usually in organisations endless opportunities to start to investigate our own kind of biases and defaults around this. One of the things I love a great mentor of mine shared was just notice when you start complaining about someone to a third party. Just be aware that, you've started to talk, you're, either dismissive or angry or frustrated. And rather than have the direct conversation, you're going over here and you're creating what's called a triangle. And every time we do that in organisations, we break trust, we break that rapport and collaboration. All of the things that we say are so important. It's so easy to do. Of course, there are things that happen that make us feel frustrated, and being willing to question ourselves and also to question our colleagues. When someone comes to me and says, I'm so pissed off with, Bronwyn for what she did, and this and that, just saying, hey, if you had a good quality conversation with Bronwyn about that, I think just being willing to sort of reflect back and do it in a kind and generous way, not you're doing it wrong here, but more, have you thought about doing this differently?
And I think the third thing is really facilitate awareness. We talked last week about how do we support individuals to show up authentically. And again, sounds really simple, but I'd encourage you to tune into that video because again, there's layers to this. And as organisations and importantly as leaders, we have a role to support our people to show up authentically, but equally to create that psychologically safe environment for them to do so.
Yeah, I think this is a really big one and underestimated. The more that we can resource leaders, the more we can support leaders to have the emotional maturity, to hold the space so that we can encourage what we call respectful disagreement, being able to argue different opinions, hear those different perspectives, hear someone who actually quite vehemently disagrees with me, because I want to understand their point of view. I don't have to take on everything. I don't have to agree to everything, but I'm willing to stay in the conversation and listen and see it as a constructive discourse, not a fight that has to be won. So, we really encourage people to, what's the way we can come at this together and find a solution or a way through that potentially works for more people than the old way or the way we were doing things.
Yeah, I think lots more, obviously, to this conversation, both structurally, systemically, but I think a really good place to start for us as organisations and especially leaders to be able to facilitate authentic leadership across organisations. We're going to leave it there. If you've enjoyed today's confidence conversation, we'd love to hear from you. And of course, if you know someone who would benefit from the conversation, please feel free to share it across your network. Head over to our Facebook page. You'll find last week's video where we talked about how to be authentic as an individual in the workplace. You can dig into that and lots of other great videos over there on our page. And if and when you're ready to go deeper with your relationship with core confidence, visit our website, coreconfidence.com.au.